Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about the mineral selenium and its important functions in weight loss and thyroid function and muscle control and muscle strength and in protecting your liver as a detoxification agent. It's such an important mineral, so we're going to be doing a deep dive into selenium. We're also going to be talking about how gluten can contribute to selenium deficiency, so make sure you stay with us to the very end. We're going to dive into this topic deeply. Now, if you're new to the Dr. Osborne Show, make sure you tell me hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. We'd like to know the extent of our audience. And if you've got questions, please pump those in now. We're going to do those first come, first serve. So if you've got questions you'd like me to answer tonight as we get toward the end of the show, I'm going to take care of you and get those questions answered. Just go ahead and start typing those in now. So let's dive in. We're going to talk all about selenium again. And so we're going to dive in first to what selenium deficiency looks like. Now, many of you, this is where sometimes identifying a deficiency actually knows what to look for, right? And so when we look at what a selenium deficiency looks like, we've got kind of two categories here that I want to highlight. The first is this top category. These are symptoms, right? Symptoms of selenium deficiency. So what's the difference between symptoms and really disease? Okay, so symptoms are, think of them as pre-disease, right? These are the things that happen before the deficiency becomes so severe that your doctor actually tests you and recognizes an existing or active disease. So symptoms come first. So generally, again speaking, symptoms are first, diseases come second. Most people, hopefully, if you've got a good doctor and you're paying attention to your health, hopefully you don't end up down here first, right? You should be looking for selenium deficiency up here. So again, selenium deficiency looks like first, symptoms. Second, if it's really chronic and stays around a long enough period of time, it can look like diseases. So thinning eyebrows, hair loss, weak or splitting fingernails, damaged skin. There's some, actually, interestingly enough, some people treat their dandruff with shampoos like Head and Shoulders. Why? What do they contain? They contain, their active ingredient is a type of selenium. So we know that skin inflammation can manifest as selenium deficiency. Fatigue, depression, and we should probably add in here irritability is another very common one. So if you're finding yourself truly irritable, you might consider selenium as a potential for the issue. Brain fog, muscle weakness, and also muscle pain. So if you struggle with unexplainable muscle pain or weakness and it's not, you're not working out aggressively, you weren't injured, there was no traumatic injury, this is something to consider with selenium deficiency. But also frequent illness and infection. So if you're that person who gets sick every year, right? If somebody walks through your house and they've been around somebody with a cold or a flu, and you pick up everything at the drop of a hat, think selenium, because selenium plays a major role in helping your immune system recognize pathogens and eradicating those pathogens. So frequent illness, frequent infections. In essence, you're the person that gets sick all the time. Now, coming down here, diseases linked to selenium deficiency. One of the big issues is heart disease. Now, particularly something called congestive heart failure and cardiomyopathy. Now, there's a disease originally discovered predominantly in China. The Chinese did a lot of research because they have a lot of selenium depleted soil. And so it's not an uncommon deficiency to have there. But heart disease, congestive heart failure, cardiomyopathy, otherwise known as Gaucher's disease, that condition again will manifest as a problem with the heart. So if your doctor's ever diagnosed you with congestive heart failure, and they say, hey, you have congestive heart failure, maybe your legs are swelling up and fluid is accumulating in your lower extremities, and they've never tested you for selenium, ask them to test you for selenium deficiency. Most doctors don't want to do that because their claim is that selenium deficiency only happens in third world countries. Well, guess what? That's not true at all. As a matter of fact, if you live, depending on where you get your food from, because most selenium comes from the soil, and then the animals that eat the plants that accumulate selenium, those animals then translate selenium into our diet. But if you live in the north whether it's east, and we're talking about the U.S. here, or west, we're talking about low levels of selenium in the soil. So let's say, for example, you live in Oregon and you like to buy all your food locally grown and organic. Know that that soil has got less selenium in it than the soil here in my state of Texas, and that might put you at a greater risk for developing that selenium deficiency. So if you live in the Northeast, if you live in the Northwest, you have a potential greater risk of selenium deficiency just by the nature of the quantity of selenium in the soil. So it's not just third world countries, folks. It's very, very real, and it's very, very much here in the U.S. And I see it on a really frequent basis in my nutrition practice. So again, you just want to be aware of it, because if you're aware, you can have that conversation with your doctor. It's very easy to test for selenium deficiency and knock that out. There are other diseases, though, linked to selenium deficiency. Probably one of the most well-studied nutrients as it relates to cancer. Okay, particularly breast cancer, prostate cancer, liver cancers. And so if you've been diagnosed with cancer, and again, and you're maybe even being treated with this cancer, and your doctors haven't looked at selenium, look, this is one of the emerging fields of research, is using selenium nanoparticles to treat cancer, because preliminary research shows that it's extremely effective. So again, we want to make sure you're not depleted in selenium, because selenium deficiency by itself increases the risk for the development of certain cancers. So again, taking care of that. We know that selenium plays a role in thyroid disease, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a minute. Fatigue. Now fatigue, and when we say fatigue, is fatigue a disease? It is if they call it CFS, right? And so many of you may have been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and that's what you're struggling with. Well, that can also be a symptom here. Neurological diseases, Alzheimer's, progressive dementia linked to selenium deficiency, mood disorders linked, especially agitation and irritability. And then we also have bone and joint diseases, as well as muscle pain and inflammation. So muscle, bone and joint disease without trauma. Again, this is the key. The cue in there is, I'm not talking about if you worked out aggressively and injured your knee and now you're dealing with a chronic injury. I'm talking about your muscles, your joints hurt, and there's no explainable reason as to why. You haven't injured yourself, etc. So very, very common in selenium deficiency. And then infertility is another big one. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're struggling to have a baby, if you're struggling to get pregnant, that selenium plays a major role in fertility health. For men, first of all, I want to just bring this up since we're talking about fertility as it relates to selenium. A lot of times, the ladies get blamed for the fertility problem, and then they go to the fertility clinic and they get pumped full of a bunch of hormones, right? But men, it might be you that's the issue, right? And so one of the things we know about selenium is selenium helps with sperm motility and something called sperm viability. So men, if you're low selenium, your sperm don't swim as well. They don't make the journey as well. If you're low in selenium, your viability, the membranes around your sperm break too easy, so your sperm can't survive the journey. So not only are they slower swimmers, but they're weaker in terms of surviving that journey. And so this can lead to a fertility problem with couples. The same, but with women, we see issues with eggs being less viable, and in the antioxidant status of women, putting them in a position where it's harder for that conception to occur, because one of the fundamentals here is low antioxidants reduces fertility. This is why cigarette smokers and alcoholics have a harder time getting pregnant. This is why people who have very poor diets have a harder time getting pregnant, because their antioxidant status is poor, and that leads to, you have to understand, one of the roles of selenium is it's a very potent antioxidant, and it protects not just the sperm, the membrane around the sperm, but it protects the egg, right? And so it protects the viability of the potential to get pregnant through preventing reactive oxygen species or free radicals from destroying the egg and the sperm. So very important, because fertility treatment is on the rise, right? If we look at a lot of couples today, they're having to go to reproductive endocrinologists to have a baby. in my opinion, this may sound a little, well, that's okay. I'm just going to hit you in the face with it, and if it happens to be you and you get offended, that's okay too. In my opinion, it's irresponsible to go to a reproductive endocrinologist if you haven't looked at nutrition first, because nutrition is one of the most important elements to healthy capacity to get pregnant or to sustain a viable pregnancy. And when you force it with hormones, what you're actually doing is you're overriding your body's natural ability to carry the baby to term and to deliver a healthy baby by overpowering the body with hormones that prevent it from, you remember your nutrients are fail-safes. They're what abort when a baby's supposed to be aborted because there's not enough zinc, because the brain won't develop, and now the baby's going to have health consequences as a result of that. So nutrition and fertility are very critical, and selenium plays a major role in that. So if you are having struggles here, before you go and inject yourself with a bunch of hormones, look solidly at selenium, but even more solidly, look at your overall nutritional status, both of you, male and female, because both of you are playing a role in that capacity for a healthy fertility. Then we have inflammatory bowel disease, and this is a big one, and I'll show you why in just a minute, because selenium plays a role in regulating the inflammation in the GI tract. So those are some of the big symptoms and diseases associated with selenium. So if we kind of pull this up in the middle here, we look at some of the functions of selenium. So now you kind of understand some of the diseases and the symptoms associated with selenium deficiency, but here are some of your functions. One of the primary functions is selenium regenerates or recycles, helps to recycle vitamin C and vitamin E, but also glutathione. Now, many of you have heard of glutathione. Some of you probably even take supplemental glutathione. This is what your liver uses to detoxify a number of the different toxic compounds that you come into exposure with every day. So your liver needs this glutathione to properly keep your body not toxin-free, but underburdened, right? Not overwhelmed by toxins. And so selenium is like imagine, you have your cell phone, and when the battery goes dead, you have to plug it into the charger, right? Well, selenium is like the charger for the cell phone. It's like the charger for glutathione. It charges it back up. We also know that it's a powerful antioxidant. So as I was mentioning earlier with fertility, its function as an antioxidant. Why is that important? Every one of your cells, if this is a cell, you've got the wall of the cell on the outside, right? And then you've got the nuclear wall, and you've got the little mitochondria within the cell, and those have a wall. We'll call that a mitochondrial wall. And then you've got other organelles within the cell that serve different functions, and they all have little cell walls or little mitochondria or little organelle walls around them. And so if we look at this wall up close, if we kind of zoom in, if you will, it's what's known as a phospholipid bilayer. Now, why is that important? It's important because walls are barriers. And so how can this cell stay viable without toxins leaking in and without nutrients and things leaking out, right? It's this cell wall, right? It keeps things where they're supposed to be. And so if we look at the cell wall, if we have selenium deficiency, this cell wall will rupture easier and that cell will break open. But again, it's not just the cell wall, it's the nuclear wall, or the wall that surrounds the DNA, right? So it exposes the DNA to potential damage. It exposes the mitochondria to damage. It exposes your other organelles like your Golgi apparatus, protein-making machinery inside your cell wall. It damages those membranes. Again, these membranes, very, very critical. The outside is a water, the inside is a fat. And this is, if you've ever poured oil and water into the same glass, like in science class, what you got was you got a separation. The water and the oil's naturally separated. Well, this is your cell wall. That oil is like a natural barrier, right? So that things don't penetrate in and things are contained within. And it's very important because if this barrier breaks, and again, selenium deficiency makes this barrier break a lot easier, that's its function as an antioxidant, then what happens is your cells become less viable. They die sooner. They rupture easier. They don't survive the way that they should. This is why selenium is linked to so many different types of problems and symptoms and diseases, and not just a few things. So very, very important to understand the power of selenium as an antioxidant. We also know selenium regulates immune secretions. So there are a number of different chemicals that your immune system releases in an effort to kill viruses and bacteria and other microorganisms that don't belong. Selenium helps that process. There's actually a lot of the research from selenium actually came from HIV to AIDS. We know that, for example, people that have HIV that progress to AIDS, one of the biggest reasons why this can happen is nutritional deficiency, and selenium being primarily one of those nutrient deficiencies that can drive that factor. People that have low selenium with HIV have lower CD4 cell counts, which is a very important type of immune cell, and so they progress to AIDS much more readily because selenium's role in producing immune cells, but also regulating the chemicals that they secrete. We know that selenium regulates testosterone production. So in men, one of the organs that stores or concentrates the most selenium are the gonads, right? And that's because we've got to make testosterone, and selenium is required for that process to be able to do it. So for a lot of men, where we'll see, for example, benign prostatic hypertrophy, we'll see the prostate enlarge, we'll see the man not be able to gain muscle, we'll see they're losing their muscle mass, they might be working out and they still can't build muscle because their testosterone is low, and the doctor wants to give testosterone without any thought as to whether or not selenium deficiency is contributing to that low testosterone. Remember, your body should be able to make testosterone. And this goes for you too, ladies, because you make testosterone as well, and testosterone is important for your hair growth and your health of your skin and your libido, right? And low selenium creates low testosterone production, so it's not something you want to get into a situation with. So again, recycles vitamin C, E, and glutathione. It acts as a very potent antioxidant to protect the cell membrane walls. It regulates thyroid hormone. We're going to dive into that in a minute, I promised. It regulates testosterone production, and it regulates immune function. So a lot of critical functions for selenium. Now, how can we get more selenium in the diet? Probably the best way to do this is with a Brazil nut. Brazil nuts tend to be very, very rich in selenium. Your second best choice is seafood. You'll notice shrimp, sardines, salmon, and cod all at the top of this list. Very, very rich in selenium. And then we have a variety of other high selenium foods down here as well. Swiss chard, mushrooms, asparagus, turkey, chicken, beef, eggs, sunflower seeds, and seaweed, all really high quality and great dietary sources. And I'll say gluten-free and grain-free sources of selenium, because some of the grains contain selenium, but if you followed me for any length of time, you know why those are things that I don't tend to recommend. Now, I'm going to fast forward over to this diagram here because I promised to show you the role that selenium plays in the maintenance of thyroid. So we're going to draw a little bit more. I didn't put all the organs on here, but your pituitary gland, let me spell that right for you. Your pituitary gland produces a hormone called TSH. Now, TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone, and that means it goes and it travels to that gland in your neck shaped like a butterfly called the thyroid gland, and it stimulates the thyroid gland to generate T4. Now, if we break down T4, and you want to understand it nutritionally, the T is tyrosine. Tyrosine is an amino acid that you get by eating a number of different things, but remember, amino acids are the building blocks of protein, and a lot of your tyrosine comes from meat-based sources. There are some plant-based sources as well, but you need tyrosine, and I see this because I see a lot of people that are trying to reduce their protein intake. They struggle with thyroid health problems because they're not getting adequate tyrosine in their diet. So it's important to know tyrosine, the amino acid that plays a role in the structure of thyroid hormone. T4, this is thyroid hormone, by the way. T4 is thyroid hormone. Tyrosine is the backbone. The 4 here, this is iodine. So this is like 4 molecules of iodine. Think of it like 4 tires on a car. If the tyrosine is the frame of the car, the 4 tires are made out of iodine, right? And you have to put that together. Okay, so your body puts that together under the direction of this hormone from the brain called TSH. But then this T4, generally it travels to the liver, right? And then inside the liver, we get this T4 is converted into T3. Okay, and so this conversion, right? And basically what's happening is we're losing 1 iodine. So we're going from a 4-wheel car, racing car, to like a 3-wheeler, right? It's important to understand that T3 is active. It's the actual active hormone. T4 is inactive, meaning your body, T4 doesn't work. It's the way that thyroid hormone is carried through your bloodstream, and then when it travels through to the liver, it's converted to T3 where it's activated. And why is this so important? Why are we even talking about this? Because a lot of the symptoms associated with selenium deficiency occur as a result of poor thyroid, because metabolic function requires thyroid hormone. And if you don't have adequate production and conversion of thyroid hormone, understand what metabolism is. Metabolic function, otherwise metabolism, is the sum of all chemical reactions in your body. So it's the reactions that build new tissue and repair damaged tissue. Those are the reactions that break down damaged tissue so that you can make room to build new tissue. These are reactions that build hormones, that build muscles, that produce insulin, that make all the different things inside of your body that your body needs when it needs it. And if your metabolism is slowed down, again, the sum of all those chemical responses are slowed down, you're in trouble, right? And this is all driven by thyroid hormone function. Well, how do we activate thyroid hormone? This little arrow right here represents an enzyme that requires selenium. So the conversion of inactive thyroid hormone from T4 to T3 requires what's known as a deiodinase enzyme that is selenium driven. So selenium does this. And so if you're selenium deficient, you know, and take note of this, any of you who are being put on a drug like Synthroid or levothyroxine, where your doctor's treating you because they've told you have hypothyroid, right, which is one of the big diseases associated with low selenium. So if you've been told that you have hypothyroid, right, and you're on a medication, again, like levothyroxine, very commonly prescribed, oftentimes there's brand name and generic. Synthroid is the brand name of the medication. But there are a number of different thyroid drug preparations. Most of them are T4. Very important that you understand, because if your doctor is giving you a drug that is T4, your body still has to convert that drug T4 into T3. And if you don't have selenium, you may be thinking, well, I never felt better taking levothyroxine or Synthroid. I never felt better taking my thyroid medication, and your doctor never checked your selenium. But what happens a lot of times, and I see this very frequently, is that individuals that are taking these medications that have a selenium deficiency, we start putting selenium in the equation, and their medicine becomes way too strong because it really wasn't working. They didn't have enough selenium to convert properly, and so the medicine was less effective because of the selenium deficiency. So it's important that you understand, if you're listening tonight and you're thinking, I'm going to run out and buy a bunch of selenium, and you're on a thyroid medication and you just start, pounding 400 micrograms of selenium a day, you might make your drug more strong, too strong in fact. And so if you're going to do this, I would recommend that you do it where this is being monitored, where your TSH and your T3 and your T4 are properly being monitored, so you don't create a thyroid storm or a hyperthyroid situation. Because remember, hyperthyroid can cause a lot of the same symptoms as low selenium, right? It can cause hair loss, it can cause thinning eyebrows, it can cause drying of the skin, it can cause dry mouth, it can cause heart palpitations, trouble sleeping, right? So too much thyroid as a result of taking selenium, now your drug is working better. Just be aware that that's a potential possible outcome. So again, going back to selenium, converts T4, inactive thyroid hormone, to T3, which is your active thyroid hormone, and that is what speeds up your metabolic function. Now, I should say speed up. That's what regulates or normalizes your metabolic function, because if you're here, we're not really speeding it up. We're normalizing it. We're taking it from underactive to normally active, right? Which is the goal, so that your body can heal and repair and produce hormones and produce proteins and do its job effectively. So you have to understand, selenium, without this little tiny mineral, you can't do this efficiently, and you can create all kinds of havoc and wreak all kinds of havoc on the body. So selenium is very crucial for T4 to T3 conversion. So that being explained, let's back up a little bit here, and I want to talk about, I said I would talk to you about gluten as well. This is what we call the gluten-induced selenium deficiency trap. So here's what I want you to understand. Now, I mentioned earlier, we said that selenium, that one of the side effects of selenium deficiency, right, we said inflammatory bowel disease. Very important if you're gluten sensitive or if you have celiac disease, because if you have celiac, you have inflammatory bowel disease, right? And so, again, selenium deficiency can cause inflammatory bowel disease, but inflammatory bowel disease can also cause selenium deficiency. And that's where we get into this trap, right? So we got gluten that damages the intestine, that leads to malabsorption. In this case, malabsorption of what? We're talking about selenium, right? So malabsorption of selenium and leading to selenium deficiency. Now, selenium deficiency causes intestinal inflammation, as I just showed you, and that intestinal inflammation worsens the selenium deficiency. Now, if you're one of those kind and you've never heard of me, and you haven't followed the true gluten-free diet, or you haven't read No Grain, No Pain, and you ran over to the grocery store when you found out you needed to start avoiding gluten, right? This is a big one. And you started eating all that processed, gluten-free, boxed crackers and breads and all that other nonsense garbage that's not real food. You have to understand there's not really any selenium in this stuff. So what you're getting is, now you're deficient in selenium already. The inflammation is worsening the selenium deficiency. The processed foods are worsening the entire situation, but they also don't contain selenium. And so now you have this persistent selenium deficiency that increases the risk of all those health issues that we've been talking about, right? And then, as we said a moment ago, selenium deficiency causes intestinal inflammation. So if you're trying to go gluten-free to heal your intestinal inflammation, but you're doing so by eating all this junk food and you're already selenium deficient, this is what oftentimes doctors refer to when somebody goes gluten-free and they don't respond and they have celiac disease, is the name they give it. It's called refractory celiac disease, meaning you've gone gluten-free, but you just didn't respond, and we don't know why. Well, what do many doctors want to do when you have refractory celiac disease? One of the first things they're going to prescribe is a steroid to calm down the inflammation within the GI tract. Now, here's the catch-22 with that, is that steroids cause selenium deficiency. And if you don't know that, if you're on a steroid, if you've been on a steroid, whether it's for joint pain, whether you take a steroid for lung asthma, for an inhaler to open up your airways, whether you're taking a steroid to manage or mitigate your joint or your muscle pain and inflammation, whether you're taking a steroid to regulate an inflammatory process, whether you've gotten an injection because of herniated disc or whatever it might be, you have to understand that steroids, as the family, as a class of medications, reduce selenium. They actually induce selenium deficiency. And so again, we just said that sometimes refractory celiac disease is misdiagnosed because of the selenium deficiency, and the treatment is something that causes the same deficiency to become worse. So you can see how you can get into a really mega bind if you don't isolate and identify that particular issue. So again, you got to do it right. You got to get tested. My opinion, first and foremost, get tested. Measure for selenium deficiency, because if you're not measuring, you're guessing. And here's the thing, there's some toxicity symptoms of selenium too. So we said earlier that selenium deficiency causes hair loss and changes in your nails and changes in your skin. Well, selenium toxicity does the same thing, okay? Selenium toxicity can cause hair loss, abnormal nail changes, weak nails. Oops. So that's fingernails, right? And so the symptoms can overlap toxicity to deficiency. So if you're just taking and pumping a bunch of this stuff and you don't know, you could end up with a problem. Now, the good news is there are no reported cases ever of a selenium-induced death in humans. Like that's just never happened. So the likelihood that a person is going to create a selenium toxicity is probably pretty low, unless you're just chugging the whole bottle of pills a couple of times a week. That being said, let's talk about upper intake. So 400 micrograms, if you're not being monitored for deficiency, if your levels of selenium aren't being monitored, don't overshoot 400 micrograms, and probably you want to stay closer somewhere around the 200 microgram range. The general recommended daily allowance of selenium for adults, and it's different between males and females, but it's between 50 and 70 micrograms a day. So this is like if you want to not have Keyshawn disease, which is congestive heart failure as a result of selenium deficiency, then you need to get at least this much. But in some cases where people are really, really low in selenium, you've got to really dig them out of a hole. And so supplementation becomes an important part of that process of digging them out of that hole. But I just don't recommend going and just popping high doses of selenium over long periods of time without having your doc look at this and measure it. Now, there are a number of different ways that we can measure selenium in the blood. The best way is something called intracellular. So we actually look inside the cell, particularly your immune cells. We look inside what's called a lymphocyte, because the lymphocyte is where a lot of the selenium is going to function for your immune system. Remember I said earlier that selenium drives a lot of the properties of immune function. But there are other ways to do it. There's a test called glutathione peroxidase. Actually, the name is activity. So when you ask your doctor glutathione peroxidase activity, this test can help you understand. Remember that selenium regenerates glutathione. So if your glutathione peroxidase activity is low, selenium deficiency can be the cause of that. But you got to be careful with this test. And I know I'm getting a little geeky here, but vitamin B2 deficiency can also cause glutathione peroxidase activity to be low. Selenium deficiency can as well. Vitamin E deficiency can as well. So if this test comes back abnormal, you got to consider all three of these. So this test isn't independently unique for just selenium. Now, some people also will measure hair levels of selenium, but I have found that hair levels, you've got to be so far under. In essence, you've got to be so malnourished with selenium that you practically are already developing Keyshawn disease. So hair tests, in my experience, they're going to pick it up later in the game than these blood tests. So the blood test, in my opinion, much more accurate way to try to assess selenium. Now, additionally, something else you can do and again, it's not solely selenium, but white spots on the nail beds. That can be a selenium deficiency, and it can also be a zinc deficiency. It can be other minerals as well. So again, it's not accurate just for selenium. So if you've had white spots on the nail beds of your finger, know that that might be a sign of selenium deficiency as well. Could be zinc, could be other minerals. So the best way, going back again to the absolute best way fundamentally to look at it, is right here, intracellular analysis inside of your lymphocyte. So ask your doctor for that type of evaluation if you're going in and you're saying, hey, we want to get this measured, because that's where you're going to get accuracy or levels of accuracy. The other problem is with glutathione peroxidase, I was talking about this, aside from this, there are 5 different types of glutathione. There's GPX, we abbreviate it as GPX. Okay, so you got GPX 1 through 5. And so depending on which one we're referring to, it's more specific for different organs. And so again, unless your doctor's running all 5 of these, even if he is, you may not pick it up, and you may get the confusion of the other nutrients. So again, going back to intracellular, definitely the way that you want to ask of your doc to measure your glutathione levels. So one other thing I'm going to mention before I open it up to questions is I said earlier that steroids cause selenium deficiency. Now, many of you right now are under chronic stress. And when you're under chronic stress, guess what happens? Your cortisol goes up. Now, what are steroids? When doctors prescribe steroids, what are they prescribing? They're prescribing something otherwise known as, most of the time, corticosteroids, okay, which do the same thing. So corticosteroid prescription can lower your selenium, but you overproducing cortisol because of chronic stress over many years also depletes selenium. As stress does for so many other nutrients, stress depletes your vitamin and your mineral status. Well, in as far as it relates to selenium, the mechanism is through cortisol. So the excessive cortisol production leads to a reduction over time in selenium, which then can come with all those other symptoms, side effects, and potentiating different diseases and disease manifestations. So be cautious with that. If you're under chronic stress and you're not dealing with your stress, maybe your diet's okay, but you're not dealing with your stress, and there are a lot of different ways that you can handle chronic stress. One is alleviate the chronic stress by escaping or removing yourself from the chronically stressful situation, whether that's a bad job or a bad relationship, whatever it looks like in your life. You understand that you are in power and you are in control to remove yourself from chronic stress. Now, what we don't have the power to control is, the way the world behaves, right? And right now, the world's behaving kind of in I would say, a pretty crazy way. So that creates a lot of chronic stress for a lot of you. And so a lot of you may have, over the last year, developed selenium deficiency as a result of that. So again, get it measured, get it tested, and that's your best weapon of defense, is to know and to have that knowledge so that you can apply it. And if you want to just get selenium in, maybe your diet's not rich in Brazil nuts or seafood, right? And I gave you some other options as well, but a solid multivitamin with selenium, okay? When I say multivitamin, I mean multivitamin, multimineral with selenium is generally going to have an adequate quantity. Again, depending on what you're using. If you're using something like from my production, like Ultra Nutrients or multi-nutrients, you're going to get good amounts of selenium in those multivitamins. And so then when you take that supplement and then you come in with food as well, that should give you adequate quantities. Now, every once in a while, I'll get people that are really deficient in selenium, and we really have to supplement them for a good 4 to 6, 8 months to get it corrected. But again, if you're not getting tested, this is a kind of a safe insurance plan, if you will, to make sure that your body's getting adequate selenium if you're not eating those selenium-rich foods. Okay, let's open up the floor for questions. Let's see here. Should children be supplemented with selenium? Kelly wants to know. So here's something interesting. I'm glad you brought this up. This depends. So depends on the age of the child, and it depends on the breast milk, whether or not they were breastfed. So breastfed, or I should say breastfed, I should say breast milk. Breast milk, human breast milk, let's clarify, human, has 5 times the selenium content. So 5 times more selenium than cow's milk. Okay, so when you're looking at should children be supplemented, I would say it depends on what the children's diet is, especially if it's an infant or smaller child that's still breastfeeding. And if mom's selenium content is doing well, that breast milk is going to be very potent with selenium for that baby. But if you're doing, cow's milk for your child, then you might consider that and look at the diet in other ways and see if there's enough selenium coming in from foods that is going to overcome that. In that regard, a good children's multivitamin with selenium would not be a bad idea. If you want to look at something that's gluten-free, you can look at our gluten-free kids multivitamin that we have as well. What's the condition that... I'm not sure I understand that question, Jason. I don't know what that term is that you're using. Robert wants to know, Robert says, my doctor won't test selenium. Fire him and hire a new one. Look, if your doctor won't measure nutrition, how much doctoring can anyone really do when they're not measuring fundamentals? Nutrition is fundamental to human health. Are stretchy hypermobile joints linked to selenium, double jointed as in Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? No, not really. So you're not going to have necessarily more hypermobile joint as a result of selenium deficiency. It's actually quite the opposite. You're going to have stiffer, more inflamed, and less mobile joints as a result of inflammation that's not repairing or healing. One of the mechanisms behind selenium in myopathy or muscle pain is that there are certain proteins that selenium makes in the inflammation and healing and repair process. And so selenium deficiency during that time will lead to an aggravated or an increased expression of inflammatory chemicals that bring fluid into the joint, making it hard to, when you have fluid in the joint, you can't go through full range of motion, so you're actually stiff or not looser. Let's see here. So if somebody's saying, Angelina's saying, I have high selenium without supplementing or eating Brazil nuts or not eating an aggressive amount of fish, what can you do to lower it? I would argue how you're measuring it. If you have high selenium concentration in your serum, that's not a super accurate way to measure selenium, although I would be also looking at the potential that you might be getting environmental selenium exposure from something else. Look at your hygiene products. Again, I mentioned dandruff shampoo earlier, but there are other products that can contain selenium that you might not even be thinking about that could be elevating that. So check out all of your other products. So Robert says, should we test for free testosterone and how often should we test? Mine was 341 5 years ago. That's low, Robert, depending on your age. I'm assuming if you're, middle-aged male and your testosterone is 341, it really shouldn't really be much less than 600-700. Like that's a really healthy level for an adult middle-aged male. But if it's low, I would test it probably like every 6 months, depending on what you're trying to do to support your testosterone levels naturally with nutrition. But if it's not coming up, because if it's not coming up, you want to ask the deeper questions. Why is it not coming up? You need things like B vitamins and zinc and selenium to properly produce your own testosterone. You need magnesium to produce testosterone. So there could be a nutritional issue there for you that's contributing to that. It could also be a lack of exercise. You should also, though, ask your doctor to measure not just bound, like you mentioned, free testosterone is good, but also have them measure another hormone called SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin is what that stands for. And that hormone will bind to testosterone. It will make it less effective. So if you have high levels of sex hormone binding globulin and low testosterone, it's kind of like a double whammy. Jules, I like that. Since the beer bug hit, your channel took a hit since you were telling people the truth. Yeah, the truth doesn't sell. What do they say that sells? If it earns, it burns, and if it bleeds, it leads. That's kind of the media thing. But if it's truth, that doesn't ever sell very well. People don't want to hear the truth. That's why we have the term cognitive dissonance. Let's see here. So Socrates from Austria says, I'm so stressed and depressed from the lockdown and the madness of the corona cult, cannot sleep, losing my voice, raspish, would selenium help me? Maybe, it might. Going outside would probably be the number one thing. What I've seen with a lot of these lockdowns is people being inside, away from the vitamin D, away from fresh air, so they're breathing in recirculated air. and the potential for VOCs and being emitted from furniture and paint and clothing and other things. So fresh air, get outside, find other people with your same mentality. Look, it doesn't matter what side of the COVID fence that you sit. Find people who are on kind of your same line of thought, and avoid like the illogical arguments that's why I quit talking about it a number of months ago, because nobody's going to be, you're not going to please anyone with that conversation. So it doesn't really do you any good to engage in debate where the outcome is not fruitful for your health. That just creates more stress and more problems. So I would, again, engage it and hang out with other people who are like-minded, get more fresh air, get more sunshine, and probably a really solid multivitamin outside of that. Maintain your sanity through healthy eating and through exercise, which is what a lot of people have let go during this time. They've just quit eating right, and they've quit exercising, and so now they're paying a price, and their health is deteriorating, and then you add the stress on top of that, and it's just a snowball. Robert wants to know why doctors order serum instead of intracellular tests. They look at you like you have 12 heads. It's because their ignorance on nutrition really shines when you start asking them for accuracy. Look, the average doctor has 7 hours of nutritional training or less. That's an unfortunate truth in healthcare today, and but not all of them are that way. This is why I said earlier I wasn't kidding or being facetious. Like, if your doctor won't measure it, find a doctor who will. Like, find a doctor who understands nutrition to a much greater degree and is going to help work with you to support you in your health goals. Let's see here. Myofascial trigger points. Not sure I understand your question. Do you have myofascial trigger points and so you want to work on them? I mean, the best way to get rid of myofascial trigger points is to understand whether or not you have any mitochondrial dysfunction as it relates to nutritional deficit, CoQ10 deficiency, vitamin B deficiency, vitamin C deficiency. A lot of times people will get like massage therapy and they'll get all kinds of physical treatments, but their mitochondria can't generate adequate energy to allow the muscle to relax, so the trigger points just keep coming back redundantly over and over again. Now, selenium deficiency can lead to that, and so that selenium might be helpful in that regard, but again, testing would be even more helpful to help you determine whether it's selenium or selenium and other things. Okay, let's see here. Is there a link between chronic fatigue syndrome and gluten sensitivity? And if so, what can you do about it? There absolutely is a link between chronic fatigue. There have actually been a number of case reports in the medical literature showing chronic fatigue completely clearing up after changing diet. So what I would recommend that you do, if you're not aware that there is that link, you probably have not read No Grain, No Pain. So get you a copy of No Grain, No Pain, and I would just say plow through the book. It'll take you a week or less to read it if you're a reasonable reader, and then start applying the phase 1 and then the phase 2 diet. It's a 30-day diet, and most people with chronic fatigue feel much, much better once they put the diet fix into play. Let's see. Carrie wants to know, how much is too much selenium? What are symptoms of too much? I think I covered that with mostly hair loss and nail growth problems. With selenium. So how much is too much? I would say if you're getting in more than 800 micrograms a day and you're not under any kind of supervision, as we talked about a minute ago, that's too high if you're working alone. So if you're working with a provider and they're monitoring your selenium level, then they may want to take you up to higher levels. So I would listen to the advice of your practitioner. Let's see here. Let's keep going down on the left. Okay, we got another one. How much selenium is a woman supposed to have daily? Again, if you're following just the general government recommendation, it's about 50 micrograms per day of selenium. But if you're deficient, it can take anywhere from 200 to 600 micrograms a day really to get it corrected. Mary wants to know, if a man had prostate cancer, treatment, would he automatically be low in selenium? Depending on the kind of treatment. So, if you could, give me more detail on that. But doesn't, just because he had prostate cancer treatment doesn't mean he's low in selenium, although there's a strong opportunity or strong chance that because he had prostate cancer that selenium deficiency actually contributed to the cancer. Now, certain chemotherapies and certain radiation therapies will basically deplete the body of antioxidants, right? That's part of what chemo and radiation do, is they act as free radicals to destroy cancer cells, but in the process also knock out your body's antioxidant defense mechanisms. And so, yes, it's possible that the treatment for the prostate cancer as well caused or contributed to lower levels of selenium. So kind of all the above there. Can salt give arthros? If you're referring to arthritis, not really. I mean, salt doesn't really cause arthritis. I mean, you can't be allergic to sodium. It's a mineral we all require in order to sustain our function. So I don't know why your doctor would have told you to cut out salt over arthritis, unless you were eating a bunch of processed foods that contained MSG and chemically loaded salts. That might be a good move to take or to make, but I don't know. I can't speak for why your doctor would have recommended you to cut out salt over arthritis. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Pam says, do you know about Juice Plus? I do, and I don't recommend it. Many of them are cross-contaminated with gluten, so if you're trying to follow a gluten-free diet, I think we sent one of those out to the lab a long time ago, and it came back contaminated. But I have a lot of, Pam, here's the real reason why. And they may have changed, again, I don't like to talk about other supplement companies because, number one, they may change their policy, they may change their procedure and how they produce things, and I don't have any control over that. But the reason why is I've seen so many people come to me and they're on the Juice Plus, and we test them, and their nutritional status is deplorable. Like they're taking these vitamins, and then when we actually measure to see whether or not they're deficient, they're very deficient, despite the fact that they were using this product. And that's one of the reasons why I don't really recommend that particular brand per se. Let's see here. Dickerson asks, my sister's on Synthroid and she's losing her hair. Possible reasons for that since she wants to stop her Synthroid. She may be being over-medicated. Look, one of the symptoms of too much Synthroid is hair loss. So ask her to have a conversation with the doctor to measure TSH. If TSH is less than 0.5, then, let me put a space there for you, it was less than 0.5, then her medicine might be too strong, and that could be causing the hair loss. It also could be a selenium deficiency. Again, if she's taking that particular medicine, which is levothyroxine or Synthroid, is T4. Remember, it's inactive. And so it has to be converted by selenium into T3. And so if she doesn't have adequate T3, then she may still be losing her hair, not because she's got too much, but because she's not converting the medicine very effectively. So it could be either one of those points. I would definitely ask her to talk with her doc about that. So does alkaline phosphatase in the liver, have anything to do with selenium and its effect on Hashimoto's? Well, alkaline phosphatase is an enzyme released by the liver, and if you've had your doctor measure it, sometimes it comes back elevated, and it's a marker, can be a marker for liver damage. So again, what did we say earlier? We said that the liver is the primary place, not the only place in the body, but it's the primary place. Okay, remember this? The liver is where we convert a lot of our T4 to T3. So if the liver's damaged, if you're an alcoholic, if you're on multiple medications processed by the liver and your liver's struggling, if you've ever been told you had fatty liver, if you've ever had an ultrasound of your liver and they're telling you have early stage liver disease, any of those things are going to affect potentially the conversion of T4 to T3, and that's where an elevation in alkaline phosphatase might have an impact on, even if you have adequate selenium, again, your liver cells still have to be healthy to get that conversion process done. Let's see. So Nancy, I can't tell you whether or not you should stop your Advair for asthma. I can just encourage you to have a conversation with your prescribing doctor about the potential for the steroid reducing your selenium levels and creating the potential for a problem. Remember, one of the issues too with airway inflammation is selenium regulates the inflammation process. So when you take a steroid to fight inflammation indefinitely, but you don't measure the nutrient deficiency component, you could actually end up recreating the same problem through a different mechanism. And so again, the good intent from the doctor could lead to the same process or the same problem. So it's just important to have that conversation and talk with your prescriber about that. Let's see here. Scroll down the left for me. Okay. Okay, yeah, a lot of off-topic stuff. I think this one's relevant right now. So somebody's asking me what I think about a preservative-free flu shot. I would say this, and again, this is a little bit off topic, but not really, because a lot of you are trying to improve your health, and a lot of you are worried about cold and flu season this year, and what's being really, really pushed right now is the cold and flu shot, and really not the cold and flu shot, but the influenza shot, the flu vaccine. Here's what we know about the flu vaccine. Preservatives or no preservatives, we know that the people that had COVID outcomes, we'll just call them worse COVID outcomes, okay, had the flu vaccine. I think one of the major studies that was done in the military was like 37% worse. So, you have to ask yourself, by protecting yourself from the flu, you actually make yourself more susceptible to coronavirus. And so if you're really worried about COVID or coronavirus, then a flu shot, which is, remember, even by the FDC's own admittance, on a great year, you're getting 30 to 50% efficacy. And is that worth increasing the potential of an outcome here? I would even go one step further and say, is it even worth it? If it only works 30 to 50% of the time, is that something that you want to do? Is inject yourself, even if it's relatively preservative free? Is it something that you want to do? Is inject yourself? I just I have a hard time justifying that, because the best defense against a cold or a flu or a coronavirus or any other type of infectious microorganism is a healthy, nutritional, sound body and sound mind. So get your mind right, get your body right, eat well, and focus on the controllable variables of health. What are they, right? Clean food, exercise, sunshine, clean air, clean water, stress management, and sleep. And if you're doing your part in that regard, that's the best that you can do. Outside of that, the interventional injections, the vaccines, etc. I don't know if you've ever seen, I did a lecture series a while back on immune function. You should go back and rewatch that if you didn't. But that's the best thing that you can do outside of micronutrition. And we've known this for years. Where did we learn a lot of this on micronutrients and immune system function and health? We learned it in veterinarian studies, because the farmers couldn't afford to lose their herds and their animals to massive crowding and diseases and spread of infectious diseases. So this is part of why we know so much about nutrition in animals, is because of veterinarian medicine, and we know just how critical these nutrients like selenium are in immune modulation and immune health. Okay, let's see here. I think we're just about out of time here, and we've still got a bunch of questions there. What I would say is, there's one other question. I think it came in early enough that I'll answer it. It's about facial spasms. Question was, my husband's on a no grain, no pain diet, doing really well, but having a lot of facial spasms and pain, taking magnesium as a supplement. Nicole, the thing that I would recommend the most if there's a facial spasm issue, actually a couple different things. Number one, ask your doctor to do a full nutritional workup, and especially looking at all the electrolytes, calcium, magnesium, potassium, zinc. You want to look at all of those things and make sure there's not a spasm that's being created as a result of a nutritional deficit or an electrolyte disturbance. Number two, oftentimes facial spasms can be related to nerve compression in the cervical spine, which is, again, the area from about the base of the skull down to the top bone in the base of the neck. And so sometimes there could be a nerve compression or nerve pinch sensation that could be leading to facial spasms. So if your husband's never visited a good chiropractor, that might be another option to see if there's a physical or a structural problem that's contributing to that spasm. But nutrition and structure, right? Those are kind of two of the fundamental tenets of good health. So that would be where I would encourage you to go in that direction. All right, folks. Well, we're out of time tonight. Thanks for spending Monday evening with me. As always, if you're new to the show, this is your first time, just want to say welcome. Come stop by glutenfreesociety.org. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. It's the largest gluten-free newsletter in the world. And when you sign up, we'll send you a whole bunch of free information about how to navigate properly the gluten-free diet and how to, use nutrition as a tool, as an ally on your journey and on your road to good health. So come by and visit us, and we'll get you hooked up with lots of great information. It'll also give you an opportunity to make sure you're getting emails when we do our live shows on Monday and other nights and other special occasions. So, look, folks, I wish you an excellent week. We'll see you next Monday night for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care. Hey, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show. Bring all your toughest health questions to me. I look forward to answering them. And before you leave today, make sure you hit subscribe. And once you do, click that bell. That bell is going to allow us to remind you right before we go live. But it's also going to allow us to remind you when we come out with other video content all week long. We've got lots of episodes coming your way all week long, and I don't want you to miss anything. So again, subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get notified when we have that new information put up for you. Thanks so much, and I'm wishing you excellent health. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night.